Hi guys, Samantha from Decimal Tutorials here, and today I'm going to show you how to create a cool bracelet from polymer clay. And now we're going to be using separate components for this bracelet, so it's not going to be a bangle or a cuff. We're actually going to be stringing these, so these are the shapes that we're going to be using. So before we actually get onto creating our front where we have all of the nice effects, we're actually going to start working on the backing first, and I'll explain why in a minute. So you want some black polymer clay that has been rolled out to at least 1 millimeter thick. I wouldn't go any thinner than that, but I wouldn't really go any thicker. I'd keep it around 1 millimeter thick because we're going to be doing 3 layers. We're going to have this middle layer here where we're going to set up our holes so that drilling is not so difficult later on. Then we are going to set up our front layer and then our back layer. Okay, so I've just smoothed that out, and it's not terribly important whether or not this is perfectly smooth and there's no fingerprints, but I do like to just smooth it out. And now I'm just busy smoothing it onto my tile so that it is well stuck for this next bit. Okay, and now I'm going to take one of our cutters that we're going to be using, and I'm just going to make a mark over here. And then you want to take a ruler, and I'm just going to work with that because I just need to see how tall it is roughly. Doesn't need to be completely exact. But I need to roughly see what we are working with. Then I'm just going to trim this side and this side. Okay, and that marking doesn't really mean much. Now I just needed to see how wide we needed to go, and this is my widest one. I've got another one over here that is going to sit in the middle, so we'll have plenty of space for that. Then you're going to want to take 2 wire pieces, and you want them to be roughly straight. It can be a little difficult to get this straight. I've been spending a while trying to get it straight as much as possible. And you're just going to take that and you're going to burnish that into the clay like so. And you're going to take a second one, and again just try to get it as straight as possible when you're putting it down. And burnish that in as well. I'm just using this to get it in there properly. Okay, then I will lift this out and keep it because you're probably going to need it later on. But there we are, we have something to work with now. So now you're going to take this, and however many you want, you're just going to take and you're going to cut out. So I'll cut out that one. And get rid of the excess. Now I'll move to the next one and eyeball that so that it's in the middle. And cut that out. And just continue along the length. And keep in mind we're going to be putting some beads between these pieces, so it does not need to be the so we're not going to need to make a bracelet entirely out of this. This will be more than enough to actually make a bracelet, but you are going to end up with a few extras. So I'll just continue doing that. Okay, and now that that's all set up, these are the number that we are going to be working with, and you want it to end on a you want one type on each end, because when you curl it around, we're going to be doing it on an elastic cord. You want it so that the pattern matches up. So now I'm going to put this into the oven for roughly half an hour at pretty much recommended temperature, and then when they are done, we can apply the back and the front to them, but we will do the back and the front while these are baking. Okay, now we can move on to the fun bits. So, we're going to start out with a sheet of white that's been rolled out on my thickest setting. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take it down to about 1 millimeter thick, as well as lengthening it. Then just trim up excess. Because we don't need as much as that. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take an alcohol ink dabber. Just pop this to the side. And I'm going to be using some blue alcohol ink. Any blue alcohol ink will work, but these are the ones I'm using. Sapphire blue and Baja blue. Or Baja blue. So I'm just opening those up. You can see the alcohol ink crumbles a bit. I'm just going to drop a fair amount of ink on there. And I'll start with one colour at a time. Like so. Then on top of that, I'll pop the next one. It's almost all blue. Okay, then I'm going to take some 99% alcohol. Any percent will work for this, so long as it's over 50. And I'm just going to spray my dabber, and then I'm going to go in and I'm going to dab. And this will just spread the ink around a bit more. It will make it a little less sharp than what it is. You might need to spray again. And it will just blend everything together. Because I don't really want white spots. I want difference in the blue colours, I want different strengths, but I don't really want white. Okay, and that will do. Then I'm just going to take that alcohol, give it a spray, just grab something absorbent, just lay that over the top. And I'm just soaking up a little bit of excess ink because this is a little strong. I'm not soaking up a huge amount, I'm just gently lightening it just a touch. Done. Just got to pay attention to the edges. And there we are. That looks pretty good. Alright, so now we're ready to move on to the next step. So next step you're going to be using a stencil. And I actually want it facing this way up. Okay, and we're going to line it up over here so that we can cover the whole thing in a minute, but we'll do that after we make our first pass. So then just take a roller and just roll your stencil into place so that it's not going to move when you're working with it. Okay, and I'm going to be using some copper paint. I was planning on using Swelligant, but this was brighter and I liked it more. Just going to take some of that. It's a really nice bright metallic paint. I'm just going to rub that over the surface. And this is why I didn't want the blue to be too strong, because I don't really want to see it through this copper paint. And you could of course swipe across, but I find that some of the paint doesn't quite get into all the gaps when I do that. So I prefer to use my finger to do it. And just cover your entire stencil. You could use a silkscreen as well if you happen to have a silkscreen in the correct pattern. That will also work. Make sure not to touch here while you're doing this. Okay. Then before the paint dries, I'm going to remove this. Then go wash your stencil out, and this needs to dry before we do our next pass on the other side. But all you're going to do is you're just going to take it and you're going to line it up so that you create a complete one of these, and then you're just going to repeat the exact same process. Okay, and so while that's drying, I'm then going to take some white. I'm just going to take that and fold that up into a log. Don't need to roll that too much because we're going to essentially just be creating cracked pottery effect from it. I just want you to start cutting that up into small bits, like so. Okay. Now that we've got that, I want you to just pop that onto a piece of plain printing paper off to the side and try and keep them somewhat separate. You don't want them all sticking together. We'll chop them up again in a minute or two. And what I want you to do is I want you to repeat this with some black, but I want you to make a lot less black. So this is about the same size sheet. I want you to take maybe 1/3 of that and chop that up and then mix that in. There we are. Bring over your white, spread that out, grab this, and I'm actually only going to put in about half of that. I think that will be enough. And I'm just going to spread that out a bit. Gently press it down. And then I'm just going to chop that up again so that it distributes it. Okay. And here is how it should look. Now take some black paint, and this is the brand that I am using. I'm just going to pour that over the surface, and then I'm going to start covering everything in that paint. And you want it to all be essentially solid black. You should not be able to see any more white, or at least mostly not any more white. So just distribute it around, and if you're finding that you don't have enough paint, just add some more. But this should be enough. You can just gently move it around. You don't want to be pressing on it. You'll just gently take it and kind of throwing it around, almost like when you are baking and you're mixing butter into flour, similar to that. And I'd say that's a good enough coverage. Sometimes you want to go into these clumps, break them apart, because there will be some, they've formed fairly large clumps, you need to move that. Then I would recommend popping this onto a piece of plain printing paper and just letting that dry. Okay, and so while that is drying, these have just come out of the oven, and I'm keeping them in their right order right now. And so now we are going to apply the back to these, which should not be very difficult. So I'm just going to pop this to the side, grab the first one. You're going to need some translucent liquid clay. What we're going to do is we're just going to add a tiny amount of this to the back. We do not need a lot. That should be more than enough. Take that, spread it across the surface. Then take some black that's been rounded out to about, I'd say about 0.8 millimeters thick. Press that along the edges, so, and then I'm just going to use a blade to just roughly trim that out. Put that to the side, and we will repeat what we're doing with this one to all of them. I want you to just trim these edges like so. Then just take your fingers and press along those edges, just to give it a nice kind of beveled edge. And also this will get it to stick down nicely. It will also thin this out a bit, and just in all it will just do a lot of good. And just break off the excess. And we want this backing to be very thin. We just want to have it thick enough that we can add a texture to it, so that we have a nice neat back. We don't need it to be very thick. I've got a little bit of white there that I want to get rid of. And use your fingers to smooth along these edges. There we go. I'm just picking up all this excess black. Then take any texture that you can repeat, so such as sandpaper or this texture sponge. Just press it along the back. Like so. I'm just going to run my fingers along just to smooth it out. There we go. And then I'm going to bake this for about half an hour at pretty much recommended temperature, and I am going to repeat with the other ones that we have, and then once this is done we can then apply our front. This is a little backward to what I usually do, but this is generally the best way to do it. Okay, so now we can bring over our little chips of clay. They should have dried by now, and the paper will have soaked up any little bits of paint that were left. What we're going to do is we're just going to take this, we're going to squish it into a log of clay. So. And we're just going to take cane slices from when we want to use it. And this isn't supposed to look like any particular faux stone, it's supposed to look like marble, essentially. It's just the right sort of colours that would go nicely with this project. But this is the sort of technique you can use to make many different faux stones, and I've demonstrated many of those. So now just take this, and you really want to spend a good amount of time compressing this, making sure that you get out all of the air and get these pieces all stuck together. Like so. Put your full body weight into it. And I also like to mould it into a square cane, because that's the easiest to use. Okay, then I'm just going to take a roller and just square up those edges so that the slices will fit together nicely when I cut it. Alright, I'm just going to pop that off to the side, and I'm going to roll out a thin sheet of black polymer clay, probably about 0.5 millimeter thick. Okay, and here we are. So I'm just going to pop that onto my tile. Stretch that out. And I use a piece of printing paper just to gently burnish that down, so that we've got a nice clean surface. And just go pop that onto a piece of printing paper, and we'll use that in just a minute as soon as we've started cutting our cane. And I'm going to use a nice thin clean blade like so. I'm going to start cutting my slices. I'm going to cut as many slices as I can out of this, like so. And it shouldn't take too long to do that. Alright, so now we've got all of our slices. So I'm just going to separate all of those and just pop them to the side, out of the way. And I love those black bits. Some of them are a little bit big, like here, but like in this one, they actually add quite a nice accent. Okay, now I'll bring over our black, and just going to start laying out clay. But first I want to just take this, and I'm just going to use it to trim away a fair amount of excess, because I don't want to waste my clay. So I'm just going to trim and trim there, so we don't cover space where it does not need to be covered. Okay, and then just continue laying these pieces in. And now keep in mind that you don't really want black showing through, but if it does, it's not a huge issue due to the fact that we do have black bits in our cane, but keep in mind that it is best if we could avoid that, so just try to avoid having any spaces. There we go. Now take a piece of paper, and I want you to thoroughly burnish this down, and this is going to fill in any spaces. Okay, and then after I've burnished it pretty thoroughly, I'll take my roller and just even it out. Just check. I like to now check to see if I have any areas that need some smoothing still. Like there's a little area there. This area also needs to be squished it in. And also we've got a little bit of the edge showing there. I like to use my blade to just gently shave that off. We are going to sand it later, so you don't have to keep it completely spick and span clean, but if you could keep it as clean as possible, that's always good. Okay, and now if you want to clean it up and save yourself some sanding later on, what you can do is you can take a wet wipe and some 99% alcohol, spray the surface with your alcohol, and you can give it a wipe. And this is just going to clean it up a fair amount. You'll need to rub it quite a bit. And I'll just spray some more to my cloth. And that will generally clean it up a fair amount. But it's not completely necessary. Generally sanding is going to be necessary either way. But that can help clean up any alcohol bits that might have accidentally got on. Like I've got one little blue bit here that I just want to get rid of. And in general, just tidy up. So anyway, now we are ready to just run this through on the thickest setting of my pasta machine, because I want to make sure that it's nice and even and that it is one thickness. So I'm just going to take it over to my thickest setting and I will run it through. There we go. Okay. Now I just might burnish it just a touch more, just to smooth out any cracks that might have appeared when I ran it through. But we are just about ready to start now. Okay. Right. Our other piece over here, and sitting over here, is now completely dry, and I didn't actually need any more. You can see these two go together quite nicely. This will look much better once it's sanded. So now we're going to start cutting out our pieces. Okay, and this one is going to be the long ones, and the other one's going to be short ones. And we need 5 of each. One, there we go. Okay, and now it's not going to cut through paint very cleanly, just because the paint is actually quite elastic. So I'm just going to gently tap these edges. Like so. For each one, you want to just go through, tap the edges, because it will have peeled the paint off around the edges a little bit. And some of these white spots show, that's actually quite nice. I like it because I want to give a kind of pottery feel to this. Then take your blade and use it to just remove the excess around the sides, like so. Very easy. Okay, then the next step is going to take this and we will cut out our short ones from that. And we need 5 of those as well. And you can see those ones cut much cleaner because there was no paint involved. So just lift those up with the blade. I'm just popping them to the side, and then we can join them to our backings, which we prepared earlier. Okay, so here we are. So this is roughly what it's going to look like. It's going to look better once we've finished it all off, but roughly that's how it's going to look. So we're going to take each one. I've popped it onto a backing just so that I have all the pieces set up together. And what we're going to do is we're going to apply liquid clay to the back. And I want you to be careful, because you don't want to apply too much and you don't want to get it into those grooves that we made for our holes. Just apply it liberally to the back and scrape off excess, because we don't really want that, and you can apply that to the front of this as well. There we go. And then I just want to take a bit, and I also want to apply it to this. There we go. Now I'm just going to quickly wipe away any excess. We're going to take it and we're going to place it straight on top. Gently press. There we go. Alright, and now we're going to need to tend to these edges after they have baked, obviously. But for the moment, we just want them to sit and stick for the moment. Then we will do some cleaning up along the sides. But you will then bake that for about half an hour at pre-roast recommended temperature. Repeat for all of these ones. Just apply them to the back, and then we can set about cleaning up the sides. Okay, and so these are out of the oven. And they do need to cool still a bit because they're quite hot, but you can see this bracelet's going to look quite nice. So now you can see that there's quite a bit of daylight or space between the back and the front. Don't worry though, that liquid clay will have stuck on very well. You can see here it's very well stuck on, but we do want to smooth along these edges to just clean it up. So what we're going to need to do is you first want to let these cool because you don't want to be burning yourself while you're working with them. And then what we're going to do is we're going to smooth clay along the side. But because we're going to be smoothing clay, we are probably going to end up covering those holes. So you're going to need to get yourself a piercing pin so that you can just reinstate those holes after you have applied your clay. And it will be the same for all of them. So this one should have cooled enough for me to start working with it. So we're going to grab some black clay, and the softer it is, the easier this will be. Roll it in your hands thoroughly so that you're warming it up, make it nice and squishy. There we go. Then you're just going to roll it into a log. Take that, smear that along the edge, like so. And you might need to do it a few times just to get the best effect. Okay. Then just go with your finger and gently smooth. And then you're going to need to roughly guess where your hole was. There's the hole. And just smooth over again where you made a scratch if you did. And just place that hole back there. It doesn't need to be very wide, it can be just like that. It just needs to show up so that when you insert your drill, you'll be able to see where that hole is. Just smooth out any imperfections along those edges. Okay, and I'll repeat along all the edges. You'll smooth over each side, but you can see how much better that side looks in comparison. And I will repeat with all of them, and then I'll bake for another half an hour at Primrose recommended temperature, and then we will be able to start doing some sanding. We want to coat in resin. That's the finish that I want to give these, a very light coat of resin, and then we can string them. Okay, so they are out of the oven. Let me just bring them over, and I've just rinsed off some of them in water. Now the last thing we need to do is to sand. Now hopefully you can see a difference between these two. One has been sanded, one has not been sanded. Now what we're going to do, since we're going to be putting resin on them, is we don't need to apply any specific sanding. All we need to do is get an 800 grit wet dry sandpaper and just give it a light sand, just to get rid of any paint that is still on the surface. And it should really take less than a minute to do. And then I'm just quickly going to dry that off, get rid of that debris. So I'm just using a towel to the side here to do that. And just have a look, make sure that you've got everything. I can see that I've missed just a few spots. But that's really all. You just go with an 800 grit, that's plenty high enough to get off, and also not so low that it's going to cause deep scratches. And then because we're going to be covering this with resin and we've only sanded the front, we don't have to worry about the matte finish because that will get taken care of with the resin. So you can see the edges here and the back and everything. Just make sure to get rid of any debris from the sanding. Usually I sand it by the sink, but I can't do that on camera. And then make sure to have them all dry, and then we will be ready to resin them. Okay, so I'm going to bring over a resin mat, and it's silicone, which means that if we get any spills, our pieces are easily separated. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay them onto the surface and separate them well. And I'm keeping them in the pattern that I had them when we used the wire cutout, just because those holes align perfectly. It will make stringing a bit easier. Right, now I'm going to be using Lisa Babelka's Magic Gloss. Just open that up. And I think I'm going to start with the blue one here. We're just going to put a little bit on there. because I don't want to spill. And you can see how it brightens up that copper immediately. We'll almost give it a dichroic effect. Then just take that resin and gently spread it to the edges. Don't rush this process, you have forever to do this. Essentially, it will only cure once you put it under the UV light. So just spread it out on both edges, and then you'll probably need to add some more. But I like to spread stuff out first, and then I will add more because I can cause drips later. I can cause drips if I add too much too early. You can always add more, but it's very hard to take the resin away once you have too much. There we go. Then I'm just gently going to drop on some more resin, so we get a nice dome. And you'll need to scrape that back out to the edges most likely. Okay. And then I will finish all of them, and then by then I'll be able to come back to this and see if I do need to add some more resin, if it's had any more pulling away. And then they will all go into UV light for about an hour, or excuse me, half an hour, so that they cure correctly for long enough. And then when they're done, we can start assembling. Okay, so I've just switched off the UV light, and let's see how these look. Okay, so let me just grab one, twist it around so you can see how beautiful that looks. You can see the beautiful colour shift on the copper. It makes a really big difference. These ones aren't going to have any colour shift, they just have a nice resin finish to them, but these have a really interesting colour shift along them. Okay, so I'm just going to rearrange them now so that they're all in the correct order. There we are. And now we are going to start assembling. So I've got some elastic cord here, and this is a very good brand. I buy it from Fire Mountain Gems. It is extremely strong and lasts a long time, because you can get some not great elastic thread, but this one's really good. I mean, I've had this one on the roll, probably had it for about 5 years now, and you can see it's still very nice. Okay, so anyway, we're going to cut out 2 strands, put one to the side for the moment, and I'm just going to check these holes. We're probably going to need to drill them a little bit more for our thread to fit through, so I'm just going to grab a drill. Just gently drill through. Try not to press on the resin while you're doing this. Okay, and I'll drill partially through that side, and I will also drill partially through this side until this can go through easily. Okay, and now I'm just going to check with my cord to make sure that fits through easily, and it does. So I'm just going to go and drill through all of those holes until they fit my cord nicely, and you can check them without drilling to see if they fit. You could even try using a pearl reamer, sometimes that works pretty well, but in general I will just thread through. Okay, and so I've drilled through 2 of them just so I can start demonstrating what we're going to do. Now you want to have some spacer beads that you think are going to look nice between these 2. Let's have a look how that looks. That's one of my choices. I also have this one. So let me have a look here. It's worth it doing this, checking through, seeing which one you think looks nice. I think that one looks better than that one, so I'm going to put it that way. Okay, then one last option is this one. Just try and position that. There. And that one's my favourite. So we'll go with that. So that's our spaces. Okay, so we're going to start by threading on our first piece, then a spacer, and then the next one, and then generally you will go and thread all of them on this first strand, and then you'll bring over the next one and you'll start passing through the bottom hole that we have. And I might be a little bit of trouble with this drill hole here. See if I can get that right. If not, this is why sometimes I do it sometimes it's worth it to just drill them with both the strands going through at one time, because if it does give you trouble like that, you're going to have to stop threading. It can be a little bit tricky, so generally I would thread one, then a spacer bead, then go to the next thread one spacer bead, and then continue until I have all of them threaded on. Okay, so now they're all together, and I'll show you the front side in a minute. Now, because we're drawing it together, remember you need to attach charms or spacers, whatever you wish to call them, on one side as well. So when you meet them up, it matches. Okay, and I like to do a double knot. I just want to knot the other side quickly, and then we can glue our strands together. Okay, and pull on this firmly. So, okay, now just so that I don't get confused between which one's which, so we don't have things flying all over the place, I'm just going to snip these threads. Don't snip them down too far, you just want to snip them a little bit so that they're not flying all over the place, making things confusing for you. And you want to grab some glue, and I'm just going to open it off to the side. I'm using this, it works pretty well. I've used it on a few bracelets. Just going to open that up and have it ready. It's not open, I've just got the cap so that I can just lift it straight off without having to unscrew it or anything. This next bit is a little tricky. If you have helpers, this is a great chance to call them and say, please help me, because this bit is fairly tricky. Now I'm going to try and do it without getting super glue on me. I want to split that open, take a little bit of glue. You do not want too much. Just dab the knot on either side. Don't apply too much. Then get your finger out of there. And don't untie it. Don't snip the threads or anything. You don't want to do that just yet. You want to leave that to dry. And then you're just going to repeat on the other side. And you want to do that fairly quickly before this thread dries completely. Yeah. And I managed to do that without super gluing myself. Okay. Then you want to stand that up like that so that it's not touching each other. And then you want to leave that for at least half an hour just to let it cure. And then we can snip these threads and I'll be able to show you the finished product. Okay. So now we're just going to snip those ends. One, grab the other. Okay. I'll snip down here as well. Snip fairly close, but I would not snip all the way up to the knot because you can make a mistake and accidentally snip the knot. Okay, there we are. Okay, and now before wearing or stretching this bracelet, I would recommend leaving it overnight just so that the glue sets and so that it's not going to break by accident. But here, I'll be able to show you now how that looks. It looks very pretty. I'm very happy with how this turned out. And so it is a largish bracelet. You could shorten it by creating less tiles, but I always tend to make a few extra tiles. We used up all of them in this case. And remember, this technique for creating this sort of a bracelet can be used with any technique you want. You can make the tiles and you can apply any surface technique you want, so just keep that in mind. You can use any technique you want. Today I chose to use these bright blue and copper tones with a kind of marble finish because I'm going for kind of a Japanese tiles effect, but just keep in mind you can use any technique you want, whichever ones you're comfortable with. Today we were just really focusing on learning how to create a tile bracelet, which is something I actually have not covered in a video before. So if you enjoyed this tutorial, please do let me know in the comments below. I certainly enjoyed making it. However, it is a little bit on the tedious side. I will not lie to you. It's something that I will not be doing again very soon just because it's a fairly long process. I'm very happy with the result, but this is a statement piece that if you're going to make it, you should sell it for a fair amount. It's going to use up your time. But it is something that everyone should make at least once when using polymer clay, and I'm very happy with how it's finished. It's going to wear very nicely. It feels wonderful in my hands. But if you want to make bracelets, I definitely would say that making cuffs or bangles actually is quicker than making this, just because the actual act of making sure that all these holes line up and the actual process of doing that, it's a little bit on the tedious side. And the reason I went through that instead of just drilling the holes is drilling the holes first off takes a really long amount of time, and also if you don't get it exactly straight, which is something that happens frequently to me, especially if you're new to it or don't have much practice with a drill, you are going to find that your holes wander a little bit, which doesn't matter with a single pendant, but when you're trying to line up geometric pendants like this, it is pretty fundamental that you get them lined up. So that is why this is probably one of the more tedious techniques that I have taught. But again, in my opinion, well worth it. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think this is too tedious to make, or do you think that you will end up making at least one in your lifetime when it comes to polymer clay, or do you think you'll be making it often? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you in the next tutorial. Bye for now. Thank you.